When I was starting my business here in the Middle East, Sweetheart Kitchen, we came in with a roar. We maybe invested a little bit of money in marketing, but that just fed to a lot of free publicity thereafter. You're always announcing when you're getting rounds of fundraising. The media loves to talk about that. And in this region, you're not competing with bad news or much politics. So if you're raising money or you're in the world of entrepreneurship here, generally speaking, if you have good news to share and it's to the benefit of the region broadly, it's going to make the rounds in the media.
Welcome to Reimagining You. In today's episode, I have a fascinating guest, Peter Schatzberg. Did I pronounce it right?
You did, Dr. Elie.
Great. So Peter brings in quite a bit of color for this particular episode. He started with General Electric and in the US for several years, and then he moved to GE Money. With GE Money, he started looking at acquisitions, dealing with investments and so forth, till he saw the light, I would say. And he started a very good idea. It's called the virtual kitchen. He founded that. And we'll talk a bit more about the virtual kitchen because I had to think about it. And I'll tell you my definition of the virtual kitchen in a moment. But his pedigree goes on with his bachelor degree and then his MBA in London Business School and Columbia Business School, and many other executive programs with GE, I believe, right? So welcome, Peter, to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So virtual kitchen. I was thinking about it. I know about ghost kitchens. So this is where meals are presented as a miracle from a phantom chef. Is that what virtual kitchen is?
It has evolved over time. When we first started, I was using the term cloud or virtual. When the media got a hold of what I was doing in New York, we were the first in the world. They decided to take a negative tone and started using the terminology ghost kitchen. And, we're at the stage where ghost or virtual or cloud are interchangeable. Mm-hmm. And then there's, several different sorts of models that fall underneath. I think the key element now is it is a brand that is not represented by a brick and mortar establishment. It might be a brand that is incremental to an existing brick and mortar establishment, and they utilize their existing universe of ingredients to generate some incremental revenue from having a virtual brand taking up some virtual real estate on the aggregators. Or it could be 25 virtual brands that don't exist coming out of the same kitchen. Or it can be in a hybrid model of sorts, any kind of variation. It wouldn't necessarily refer to software that supports kitchens, though. There would have to be some sort of physical establishment.
Okay.
And I'm sure we're not done seeing the variations as we continue forward because it's such a global phenomenon. I think we're in a resting period right now, but we'll see a new model coming out very shortly, I think.
Exciting. So let's talk about you. You have your career with GE, I think around technology, around investment, and what took you to the kitchen side? How did you find your mission? When did it call you?
There were a couple of data points that collided together in a brief period of time. First, I was doing quite well at General Electric, really enjoyed the environment and the people and the challenges and the rigors of the programs that I was being put through. But I was moving back from London to New York. I had an offer. A shortcoming of a large organization can be that even within the organization, and even if you are being promoted, if you are moving from a manufacturing business in the portfolio or from a capital intensive business, a lending business, for example, to a manufacturing business, the salaries may decrease even with a promotion. And that didn't jive for me. I didn't like that I was being promoted. I was making an international move and my salary was going to decrease. Simultaneously, I was just about finishing up my executive MBA, as you mentioned, at London Business School and Columbia. And I was taking an entrepreneurial class, where I had to develop my own idea from inception and present it to my classmates for their assessment. And after I had done that, several of my classmates approached me and said they would like to invest if I actually took this idea to life. And my girlfriend at the time was into yoga and organic, and that was sort of the direction of this concept. The organic wave was at 20% CAGR. Whole Foods was a really big phenomenon at the time, but no one had applied organic to QSR yet. So a couple of these things kind of came together at once, and I decided, okay, let's give it a go. I was not married. I didn't have children. Maybe I was 27 or 28 at the time. So I took the plunge head first. No plan B, plan A. We're doing this, entirely. I resigned from GE. Well, I didn't resign. I just didn't accept the promotion in the new role. And I finished up business school and just went headfirst into entrepreneurship.
So you were probably one of the lucky ones that had a compelling event, which is university. You're doing your MBA, and then you presented this idea. It was inspired during your entrepreneurship class that you were encouraged by your fellow colleagues to help you out and told you that they would invest in it. So for the audience, they might not be so lucky to find their mission. And they're probably stuck in their comfort trap. They have a nice business card, a nice title, a good company profile, and they open door with that business card. The problem is when they go on the other side, and this is where the comfort trap is. When they go to the outside, they're pretty much nobody. They will not be able to open any doors with their own portfolio unless they work on their personal brand. And I think during our call last week, you mentioned a very nice acronym. It's called PIP. Do you want to tell me more about the PIP?
The funny thing is, it's a term that was shared with me by an executive from F&B franchise. He was a CEO of a global group, and someone referred to him as a PIP, and he said, "Well, what is that?" And it's a previously important person. And it doesn't necessarily mean you've gone into entrepreneurship. It just means you're not necessarily the president or the CEO of the organization, or maybe you're in a larger organization, you have a different title. But any of us who have achieved some success in corporate and have been running a division or a company, or even been an entrepreneur running a company with 500 employees, you're not that important at a global level, but you feel yourself, you develop a bit of an ego, and there are people around you who cater to your wants and your needs and handle many of your administrative tasks in your personal and professional life. And then that goes away. And that's one of the things you have to
along with the travel and the hotels and the nice meals and everything else, right?
That's absolutely right. So you have to be prepared for that. So previously important person is, to know that is going to happen to you in advance. It helps you to adapt to what you experience when you do decide to leave corporate and become an entrepreneur.
Excellent.
The more you can be prepared for this juxtaposition, this entire transformation that's going to take place, the better.
So start building your personal brand while you're working. That's key. Identify your mission, identify your passion, identify what's your next gig, what's your aspiration in the next 5 years and 10 years. You might as well want to stay in the corporate side. That's fine. That's your play. You're enjoying it and you're keeping on till you retire at 60, 65, whatever the age is. But if you feel trapped, if you feel that I'm not happy, I drag my feet to go to work, and the toxic environment at work and whatever that you have conditions, I think it's time to start working on your personal brand, on your mission, on your ambition, and plan it, right? So
it's no different than being married for 20 years.
Okay. I like that.
And
tell me more.
And your marriage comes to an abrupt end, and you don't have a safety raft. You're not dating other women. You're 20 years older than you've ever dated before. The world has changed. Dating has changed. The opposite sex has changed. You have changed. You're a different individual now than you were when you dated previously, and certainly in the age of technology. So you must now go back out into the world, and you are alone, and you're starting from scratch, and you have to figure out who you are again before you can even determine what it is that you want in a partner. I have found dating is similar to raising capital, and I think that leaving corporate after you're in a comfort zone for a substantial period of time may be quite similar to leaving a long-term relationship or marriage. And then, boom, you're sitting in that house or that apartment alone, and you're starting over again.
I like that analogy. I like that very much. This is beautiful. So now we found your mission. The next thing is, okay, what makes you different? What makes you so knowledgeable about the kitchen? How did you build that credibility or authority? Because at the end, you're going to go raise capital, you're going to go speak, you're going to go pitch, you're going to go sell. So you were sitting in General Electric and technology, and now suddenly you became the Mr. Virtual Kitchen.
Right.
How did you build that credibility?
Well, before Virtual Kitchen, I built an organic QSR restaurant. So I did acquire considerable F&B expertise prior to going into scaled virtual kitchens. But the question still applies. How did I go from General Electric into F&B? Poorly is the one word answer.
Okay.
So anyone who's leaving corporate, especially in their 40s or 50s, you know a sector, you know a region. I would advise staying as close to your comfort zone in terms of geography and the domain that you understand. I did not do that. I didn't learn anything about food or organic in GE. I learned process. I learned people management. I learned measurement systems, but nothing prepares you for New York landlords, large rents, low salary employees who come to work sometimes hungover or not at all. Nothing can prepare you for that other than being a small business owner in a previous life. So there was a very, very steep learning curve. The business went through bankruptcy. I restructured, brought it back out, and made the intelligent decision of asking my younger brother, who did not come from corporate, but was more street smart than me, to take over the business and run it as the day-to-day manager. So I didn't raise capital because I had a food background. I think I had a different background that gives you credibility as an entrepreneur, which is surviving in General Electric for 7 years, getting into certain caliber of institutions for advancing my education. So I ticked those boxes. And your typical small business owner who might have started something when they were 20 or taken over a family business might have been better prepared than me to start an organic QSR. But there were skills I learned in GE relating to inventory management and cost accounting that I wound up applying later on when I scaled virtual kitchens, that if I started in a small family business, I wouldn't have been able to think that big as it relates to virtual. You can't have it all. I think you must have the skills required to raise money, whatever those skills may be. And if you can't raise capital, you're generally speaking not going to become an entrepreneur. There's plenty of 20-year-olds that are building, inexpensive technology apps and small business. So the world is changing from when I became an entrepreneur 20 years ago. I couldn't do that. But even still, you see most technology companies, they may be able to bootstrap it for a little while, but eventually you must raise capital if you want to get to some degree of scale.
Okay, very good. So I want to remember a word that you mentioned when I asked you for an advice, and you told me stay in your lane.
Yeah.
So when you jumped from GE to the food, you said you made it poorly, but then you emphasized staying in your lane. What does it mean, staying in your lane?
Well, I think I came from General Electric, where I was still going through executive development programs and being exposed to a broad portfolio of companies in a variety of sectors. So, and across different countries. So, and that was their intention. I had not at that early stage of my career developed any sort of continuity in any sector or in any region. But now I have. So, for example, now if I want to start another business, it would be wise or prudent of me as an entrepreneur, or even if I go back into corporate, to stay in a geography such as the Middle East, where I have demonstrated the ability to build a business, and I should probably stay in the F&B sector, which is very, very large to begin with. But if you're coming out of healthcare as a CEO or vice president, you should probably build a business that is in your sector of expertise, where you are highly competent and you can speak to investors. You know exactly, your idea is more likely to be successful and relevant to a sector that you've been participating in for 25 years. I got lucky. I knew organic was growing. There were some data points to support that. And I think a lot of my classmates were upscale, wealthy, healthy individuals. So my concept resonated with them from the consumer's perspective. But ultimately, the steepness of the learning curve going from GE to an organic QSR was several years. The first week of my first virtual kitchen business, my annual run rate was already $1 million. I understood New York. I stayed in New York. I stayed in food, and I had already experienced delivery, high volume. I wasn't reinventing anything. I wasn't innovating. I was just filling a gap that was very familiar to me because I knew so well. So, staying in your lane, particularly for your first venture, stay in your sector, stay in your geography. You're going to be challenged by potential investors, by your executive team reporting into you. You better be a master of your domain.
Very good. So that's a nice perspective from you experimenting with that. I had a guest previously, a few days ago, and we talked about this. And he's on the other side of the fence. He says that actually it's better not to stay in your lane because you bring in fresh perspective, you bring in parallels from the other industry, assuming that the parallels will apply, whether it's a B2B, B2C, and you bring in fresh perspective rather than being a domain expert, and you probably dive into the weeds a lot more than a person who's bringing in fresh perspective. He doesn't know the domain, but he knows how to build a business, how to become an entrepreneur, and how to scale it up. What do you think of that?
It really depends upon the age in which you become an entrepreneur. If you're 21 or 25, you don't know anything about any sector anyway.
Yes. Yeah.
So yes, fresh perspective. I'm 25. I understand technology and process and AI. Perhaps I can apply AI or a new technology to any sector and disrupt that sector. Fair point. If I'm a 50-year-old executive who's been in the airline industry for 30 years, why would I build anything that was not adjacent to airlines?
Okay.
So, depends, right? I think he makes a valid point. I'm speaking with the benefit of having started a business my first time. Actually, when I was 21, I started a business, but didn't do it for long. But having started, 2 businesses in my 20s, another in my 30s, another in my early 40s. And the benefit for me is how much easier was it each of those times? And when things didn't go right, why didn't they go right? And things that didn't go well were far more complex and sophisticated in the later years. It wasn't, product market fit.
Yeah.
I couldn't find customers. No, I knew where my customers were. I saw what the opportunity was. So yeah, I think it's relevant. It's definitely relevant if you are highly technical and things are being disruptive and you know a new technology to the world, and AI is a perfect example. Internet was probably the same sort of example. You can throw that kind of force into any sector and disrupt it. Sure. But you should probably hire a team of people that you surround yourself with who know the sector if you don't know the sector.
Of course, you hire your help, you hire your knowledge. Very good. Excellent point. So we talked about the mission or the ambition. We talked about the authority and what makes you different. Now let's talk how you communicate that to the open. Back in the days, how much of a social media you used to impact and to get yourself out, to claim that authority in that field and to become that person that people would actually seek you to come and speak or, go to you as a reference?
I always put the business first, and my identity as an entrepreneur was adjacent or tangent to the business and just occurred over time. I don't think no matter how you identify yourself online or how much you promote yourself online, if there isn't something credible and tangible that you've built, you can be out there all you want on social media.
Smoke in the mirrors,
So you have to have the real, genuine story. So I think you focus on that first. And once that's happening, you can in parallel begin to build your identity as a business owner, as an entrepreneur. As you were asking that question, I was reflecting back and thinking, just as my organic QSR business was struggling, Facebook was just starting to catch on. Go back to 2008, 2009. And I was probably one of the first people I would go to hedge funds or private equity websites and pull down hundreds of names. They're all in New York. Pull down hundreds of names, figure out the nomenclature for their email addresses, and build databases of tens of thousands of people, or find these people through Facebook by doing target marketing. They did yoga, they went to Equinox Gym, which is a very upscale gym in New York, and target them with ads through Facebook. And lo and behold, the business began to grow. I used MailChimp at a very early stage, hitting 20,000 hedge fund people or private equity professionals, all in Midtown Manhattan. So I was very, very early doing that. And it just came because I needed to survive and figure out a way to communicate to my audience. And because we were beginning to transition to delivery, I knew my audience was digital. I know they were ordering food online through aggregators, which was really building up in New York back in 2008, 2009. And I just kind of hit the nail on the head with that one. And then my persona and the media that I was getting came as a function of the business was doing well. I was working with a celebrity chef. He got us in the Wall Street Journal. And then it just evolved over time. I was nominated for Crain's 40 Under 40, and they decided to instead put our business on the cover of Crain's.
There you go.
But with a negative spin because, it was still, hey, where's this food coming from? I've never seen this brand before. So the media, instead of saying, hey, there's this brand new innovative approach to the food that you're getting, it was more about, hey, did you know there's 10 brands with 10 different cuisines coming from the same physical establishment? And that was the spin that they took initially. But
sometimes this helps too,
all press is good press, right?
Exactly. Putting some controversy out there, it's good.
But you, as the founder and the entrepreneur, the business becomes your identity. Yeah. And so when your business is doing well and they're speaking favorably in the press about it, it feels good. And it's natural for you to be on the defensive or to feel like you're being personally attacked if the media is challenging what you're doing. But I've come to realize you do something disruptive or different, you're going to be challenged and questioned about what it is that you're doing until you prove yourself. And then it kind of turns around and then people copy you and then you have what you want. Competition, great.
Yes, of course.
Right? Yeah. It might even be better to be challenged and to be negative because then you'll have fewer people following and competing with you for a longer period of time.
That's fascinating so far, the journey. I think you've hit pretty much all the milestones of a person that wants to move and transition. So you had a compelling event to define your mission. Some would be unlucky, but some have to soul search it and try to find it while they're working. What's the next gig? What's their ambition? Then they'll have to differentiate somehow for themselves what they're best to be known with. Ask some people around, check yourself, what is your knowledge and how can you actually put it out and claim authority. And then you go and you start leveraging your social media today by putting some authority out, by maybe publishing something, by going into conferences, by speaking, by doing all sorts of artifacts that you can start claiming that authority. You had it differently, right? You have spoken, you have published, you sent Facebook, you have sent MailChimps, but you had also a proof of concept, right? You had your story to tell. It's a genuine story. You had also some celebrity chef that participated with you, and you had some magazines to cover you, whether it's negative or positive press, it's still press, right? So you've done that pretty well. I'm going to move to now network. A lot of people think about, growing the network because you rely on your network, particularly when you're on the other side of the fence. If you're in the corporate side, your network is pretty much your customers and your colleagues, right? And
very dangerous.
Very dangerous, exactly. You go to trade shows, you have a business card, you scan a business card, put it in content, you file it in the CRM, and inshallah, something would happen with it, right? Now, on this side of the world, you need a completely different dynamic of network. And you probably categorize that network. One guest categorized them in the 3 C's. I don't want to steal a thunder, but it's nice to look at or think, how did you categorize your network? How did you grow your network? How do you engage with your network? And how do you find those people? You mentioned quite a bit around the network, but I want to dig into that.
Look, it starts with where you grow up, what your parents were, where they steer you. If your parents steer you towards the country club and learning how to play golf and play tennis and steer you towards an Ivy League undergraduate education, you have a head start already, because in all likelihood, your closest friends later in life will come from your childhood friends. And if your childhood friends are the sons and daughters of successful doctors, attorneys, and business people or politicians, the likelihood that your network will blossom and become very powerful in the future is exponentially greater than if you grow up and you didn't have this privilege.
Okay.
So let's take that for granted and just assume a child born of privilege will have a better network potentially than a child not born from privilege. I came from a blue-collar background, but I was forced to go to college. But just as a typical New York University school, I'm still in touch with my old college my old college roommate. He's a very successful partner at an accounting firm. So the friends you associate, but he never drank and he worked very, very hard. So the people you begin associating with in your late teens and your 20s are going to be the people you rely upon in your later 20s and your 30s. Maybe they're going to be potential investors. They'll make introductions. So I really think, and that's why they have the country club, and that it is really essential to, especially if you're corporate, to know the executives in other organizations and to meet the executive recruiters of the world, because they really don't take cold calls. So, one thing I've been doing the last few years, I'm not big into the conferences. Those are shake hands, exchange business cards, and 100 of those is worth 0. Versus if you can go and have a coffee with someone and get to know them, and you can keep that conversation going over WhatsApp or email and go for a walk once a month, you're building a relationship where if and when the time comes that you're asking a favor, you're asking a friend for a favor. And in this part of the world, more than the US or Europe, people do favors for friends. People don't do favors for acquaintances, right?
Correct.
So I think, so building these real, genuine relationships, building them is going to be based upon the clubs you belong to. It's going to be built based upon where you live, who you affiliate with outside of work. And that's how you're going to expand your network to people outside of the ones that you're working with on a daily basis. Play in a poker game once a week with the other fellas, but just make sure you're building relationships with people who can add value. And you should want to reciprocate to them that you can add value and enhance their lives and their personal relationships and their career. Invaluable, very, 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 really essential. And our network has really deteriorated or has not developed for 5 years. And you're relying upon people from 5, 10, 15 years ago when you make your next step, your next move. That could be dangerous.
Yes. Talking about dangerous, while I was talking about the network and talking about the corporate network and business card, you mentioned something. It's dangerous. Why is it dangerous from the corporate side?
If you leave or you're terminated, right? All of your friends, all of your acquaintances, your entire network are all in an organization where you are no longer working.
Yes.
Whether you've been terminated or of your own free will, you've departed. So, and look, the best executives in the world know this, and they're all friends with one another. And you'd wonder, why are competitors, CEOs playing golf with each other? For just this reason.
Yes.
So, I think you have to be very strategic about building a network outside of your organization, potentially with the competitors of your organization, because in all likelihood, if you're in corporate for 20 years and you're going to stay in corporate, you're going to probably stay in the same sector. You're going to go work for a competitor, which, means probably playing nice with the competition a little bit, at least being professional and being a gentleman.
Yeah.
Because if you're too cutthroat, well, anybody who you cut isn't going to necessarily want to do you a favor because they're not a personal friend. adversaries, but still keep that
Yeah.
professional relationship there. That way, you make a phone call because you've been terminated or things didn't go well or you left. You want to have people that you can call immediately. They'll
Yeah.
say, oh, been working with you as an adversary for years, but I always respected you. Let me see what I can do.
Perfect. I want to also talk about referrals because my experience, the way I met you, is through referral. I asked a friend, and I told him that I'm looking for the certain profiles from my podcast, and he referred me to 5 people. Similarly, I just asked you the same question. Can you refer me to 5 people that would probably fit the profile for the podcast? So I would advise the audience to really think of referrals, because when you go to a friend and ask for referrals, and a friend will do you a favor by referring the people that he believes or he or she believes that would be of help.
Mm-hmm.
And by just listing the name, the other person is kind of politely obliged to answer you.
Mm-hmm.
And this is very powerful. Like, maybe if I didn't mention the name of the person who referred me to you, you probably say it's a spam mail, or it's, I'm not going to respond to this. I receive tens or hundreds of those, right?
Correct.
So any comment on referrals that you've experienced maybe?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's all about the credibility of who has referred you. So if you're being referred to an executive recruiter, if the person who's referred you is highly established and credible in their mind, then you're worthwhile speaking to. And this is why I say shaking hands at conferences isn't going to generate anything that's in the form of a lead or a material relationship. You and I spend time on the phone with one another. Coincidentally, the individual that introduced us, he and I come from similar worlds, but had never met, but have heard of one another. And it made a lot of sense for us to build a relationship. We met over coffee. We liked each other. We met again. We took our wives out and brought 3 or 4 couples together to have a dinner.
Nice.
And we did this all in a very brief period of time. And I think, at least from my perspective, I think we accelerated the building of a relationship that we saw we liked each other personally, and we could benefit from one another professionally. And we started swapping introductions. I think I've made some introductions that are key for him. So I think you must, we're in a world, it's a transactional world, but also I do think that if someone is going to introduce you to someone to your benefit, you should think about, how can I return that favor? Because referrals or networks are a type of currency.
Yeah.
Right. And you use that as a currency when you're an entrepreneur, because oftentimes you don't have cash. You have to have some sort of currency. But I think the referral system, it's global, right? It's probably why there's arranged marriages in the scene, right? What is the credibility of this individual who I am meeting for the first time, and whose word stands behind this individual, so that I can overcome the trust barrier on day one. And I know that I'm not wasting my time. They're credible individuals.
So, excellent. I'm thinking now of you speaking, because obviously you've done this many times. You're comfortable in speaking. You've done speaking engagements in conferences or on interviews and so forth. How do you get speaking engagements, and what sort of advice you would give for the audience that is, probably not very comfortable, or they don't know how to get a speaking engagement? Because I think speaking engagement gives you a medium to claim your authority as well, and show what you know, basically, to others.
As you're building your business or your reputation, it's not a chicken before the egg. These things are happening in parallel. When I was starting my business here in the Middle East, Sweetheart Kitchen, we came in with a roar. We maybe invested a little bit of money in marketing, but that just fed to a lot of free publicity thereafter. You're always announcing when you're getting rounds of fundraising. The media loves to talk about that. And in this region, you're not competing with bad news or much politics. So if you're raising money or you're in the world of entrepreneurship here, generally speaking, if you have good news to share and it's to the benefit of the region broadly, it's going to make the rounds in the media. So, and then you get invited to speaking engagements or to conferences. In fact, I used to be invited to a lot more conferences when I was still running my company and building it. And, it's kind of teetered off. And I haven't actively pursued, but I still attend conferences, and I'll see people on the stage who are, you might call junior or less experienced than me. And I'm now an attendee listening to them. And candidly, in the past, that might have bruised my fragile ego as an entrepreneur. But today I kind of understand this is how it works. And if and when I build something else, I'll begin to be invited again. And this ties into, remaining relevant,
Yes.
right? So you can be
point.
an authority, but an authority of what? And if you're going to be an entrepreneur or a business leader, then you're only an authority if you're actively leading a business at that particular moment. Otherwise, it starts to fade. So if you're not running a business, but you want to be an authority, then you better be publishing content or publishing books, which I don't do. I don't publish content. I'm a bit of an introvert. I'll get on a stage and speak at a conference, but it took several conferences to develop the confidence to do that. Again, another growth curve I went through. You attend the conferences, you meet the people who organize them. They're not diplomats. They're business people like you who are putting together a conference, trying to make some money and some margin. And you introduce yourself, you tell them what you do. Maybe you rent a booth as a vendor one or two times and then put some money in their pocket. Let them know who you are, and you're making them some money, and then they will go and scratch your back in return. So it kind of all plays out, but there's no great mystery here.
Yeah.
It's if you are acting and benefiting others in some capacity, then you can ask for a favor in return. And generally, that's what I like to do. How can I help somebody else first? Generally, I'll offer to make a referral or actually make one before I ask for my favor.
Well said. Well said.
I like to do that. Rather someone owe me a favor than I'm in debt to them.
Yeah. You start first.
But in this region, there's no shortage of conferences across a variety of sectors, across a variety of geographies. So I think someone who's a former very senior individual in corporate, or an entrepreneur who's even just raised some pre-seed or seed funding, there's no shortage of events. But really, that wouldn't be my focus. My focus would be on building the business.
Okay.
And particularly, yes, if it enhances the business and puts us out in the spotlight in order to raise capital or to introduce us to more businesses or more consumers, sure. But in the end, it's a long day of preparation and attendance, and the ROI is maybe more emotional and you feeling good about yourself, and less about actually having a significant impact on the business that you're building.
Very well said. I want to pick on a word that you mentioned while you're describing, your presence. It's staying relevant. And the advice that I could sense from you is that, while you claimed authority 10, 15 years ago, you need to stay relevant. The world is changing. AI is changing. The actual industry is changing. The geopolitics, demography is changing. So staying relevant to trends, to what's happening around you is key to be staying relevant, staying with the authority that you want, right? So how do you stay relevant?
Well, I don't know that I've done the greatest job of that in the last 2 or 3 years.
Okay.
Admittedly. I'm also being tough on myself. I left Sweetheart Kitchen, the virtual kitchen business, and quickly proceeded to attempt to build a private equity fund and made it as far as investment committee with a sovereign in the region. And I did, I think my team and I did a really great job of putting that out there in the media. We got a lot of media coverage. Our thesis was very solid and really resonated. So I think it is about constant movement forward. And if you're getting lethargic or you're getting stagnant, then you can't expect to remain relevant. But someone like you is high energy, you're go. You can remain relevant. You're doing a podcast. I never crossed my mind to do something like this. And I probably won't do it, but someone like you is doing it. So you're going to build more of a following than I will, because you're in motion, you're online, you're putting yourself out there actively. If you hadn't invited me, I would never have approached you. So different personalities, but so I think it is very much about continuing to innovate, continuing to build your existing business, and if it's not growing or it's not going anywhere, then go move on, start another business, and as I did, leverage what you've built historically very quickly in telling the story of your new business. Peter Schatzberg, the former founder of Sweetheart Kitchen, is looking to build a private equity fund focused on franchise F&B. I mean, in this region, you can control the narrative in the media, right? No one here is snarky. The media here is not looking to undermine people, make them look bad. It's reporting news. It wants everybody to look be in a favorable light. So you can really take advantage of that. And media space here is relatively inexpensive versus the West. So you get massive, massive viewership for a very, very reasonable price. So you have to have a little bit of money, but if you're willing to spread a little money around, then you can get into the media. And they're always looking for a good story, someone young and talented, or someone from corporate who's making a pivot. These are stories that the readers want to hear about, right? They're winning stories.
Yeah.
No one wants to hear the negative stuff, and they don't cover it anyway. So if you're conscious of how the media works here, you can control the headline to some extent, and you can provide quotes. You can go to famous people from the region and say, hey, can I quote you on this, and put it into this piece that's going to take place in Caterer. You're ticking all the boxes, you're getting all the permissions, but in a unique manner in this region, you can have a great amount of control over the story that you're telling in the media. And that's very, very favorable in a way that you don't have in the West.
Very good. Very good. Well, before we wrap up our podcast, 2 questions. A lesson that has impacted you during your fascinating journey, and an advice to our audience. What would you say or share?
So, obviously this is personal to me, and with the benefit of hindsight.
Yes.
I think it would have been why I hadn't met my wife when I was younger, but if I had, would I have still started a family when I was younger, or missed out on that opportunity and waited? And I don't know the answer to that. But aside from that, I think you make wiser decisions. And again, I'm only speaking as a man right now. I can't speak for a woman. I think you make wiser, more calculated, good decisions if you have the responsibility of a family at home. I think a single young man is a little too reckless. Forget Elon Musk, forget Mark Zuckerberg. 99.9% of businesses fail. Okay.
Yes.
True. And maybe a second or third time entrepreneur has a little bit higher likelihood. It's the 45-year-olds who actually have the greatest success rate when it comes to entrepreneurship. So I think my first piece of advice would really be, it's okay to don't chop off the leg of starting a family because you're so dedicated to this mission, because the mission's going to fail. And then before you know it, you've lost 5 or 10 years of your life, and you've probably made reckless decisions that you wouldn't have made if you had mouths to feed and people counting on you.
Interesting.
Because in the end, we're all just dust, right? And no one's going to remember any of us. Your family will remember you while you're alive. And so I've had the benefit of growing to appreciate the importance of family, not just because it's great to have a family and the love, and it's great to not be a reckless combatant, full of testosterone, running into battle recklessly, and the bullets are flying at your head. Okay?
Very interesting.
I think it's really, and it's the only way to temper you is a child and a spouse, right? Your parents can't. You're 25. You have nothing to lose. You don't need much money. And it's socially acceptable to be living in your parents' basement or to be living in a garage. Whereas, if you have a family, it's not. So you'll make better decisions, I think, in your business, in your career, and in your business, even as an entrepreneur. You'll have fewer hours, but success is not, and maybe this is the other part of the answer, because I'm known for how much I work. I'm famous for that with anybody who's ever worked with me, for me. Outworking everybody else in terms of hours and grinding. is not the path to success. Is it a partial ingredient? Sure. But you could be digging ditches your whole life and you're not making a fortune in doing so. It's the IQ level you were born with. It's the network you're building as you're younger, the education you acquire, and then, picking the right idea at the right time in the right region. You might have an idea that you take for another region. It doesn't work in this region. Labor's more expensive.
Yeah.
Who knows? Technology is not as advanced. So it's really these broader headwinds or tailwinds that will determine your success. You're working 100 hours a week. It might feel good. It might feel like you're making massive progress. You're fully dedicated. You're fully focused. But I don't know that it increases the likelihood of success. If you're on the right path and you're working 100 hours, you'll beat your competitor who's working 50 hours for sure.
Yeah.
But the number of hours does not correlate that greatly with your success. You really have to have these other 75 things happening for the hours to matter. And if those other things, if you're working towards the wrong trajectory or in the wrong region, or the technology is not ready yet, doesn't matter how many hours you work. And it ties into the family piece, right?
Yeah.
Because you'll wake up before you know it, and you're 10 years into a project or 5 years into a project, and you have nothing to show for it, and your investors pull out and it closes. And this is why they also say fail fast.
Yeah.
If you're going to fail, don't fail after putting in 7 years.
Fail fast. Exactly. What a great piece of advice, Peter. My son is 25. He left his corporate job after 2 years and he started his own entrepreneurship.
Well, I hope he listens to this advice.
Exactly that. So
I'd be happy to give him some advice or look at his project.
Here you go, because this is a great piece of advice. So I'll make sure he listens to that and maybe we can connect together.
I'd be happy to meet with him, look at his materials, give him some, being an entrepreneur is like any other skill. And once you've gone through a couple of iterations, it doesn't make you a grand master necessarily, but you are better at the skills that are required to become successful. You're certainly better at understanding how investors think. You're certainly better at looking at, okay, here's an idea. What's the market size? Where's the market today? What's the CAGR? Just basic things. Is it B2B? Is it B2C? What's your go-to-market strategy? I didn't even know what any of this terminology was when I started my first business. But, you go through the cycle once or twice, and I think it really does statistically improve the likelihood of success.
Well, that brings us to the end of our episode. Okay. This has been fascinating. Appreciate sharing your insights, your journey, being candid, authentic. It's absolutely great content for our audience to listen, to be inspired. So thank you very much, Peter. And thank you again to be on our show.
Thanks, Dr. Elie. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome.